without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the AS TV's Premier League show. We're going to review match week 28. We're going to look forward into match week 29, maybe even sprinkle in a little discussion around what we expect from the side still in Europe, and how that might affect the Premier League table as we sprint to the last 10 matches. So there's 10 matches left. Tottenham and Chelsea, Bournemouth and Luton each have 11 remaining matches to play, and we'll see how important those matches turn out to be, especially in the relegation zone with Luton and, of course, Tottenham still fighting for a top 4 place. With me every week, as always, my co-host, Mr. Paul Bickler. Bickler, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hanging in there. It's like the Mondayest Monday ever, but we're good.
I do feel like Mondays are always tougher, especially when they come off of crazy ass matches like we watched between the top 2 sides. Well, at the start of the day, the top 2 sides in the Premier League, they did not end the day as the top 2 sides due to the result that ended up being a draw. And We'll touch on that quickly as we go through here. We're going to, as you can imagine, spend a good amount of time in kind of our headline section here, talking about some of the flashpoints from yesterday, what it means, and I'm sure we'll also touch on that match when we get into the table. So if I threw the Paul Bickler dart against the wall, what jumped out at you as an interesting place for us to start a quick match recap to start the weekend here for a fixture or all the way up through today's?
I'm gonna give you the old Jamie non-answer and just say, hey, I'm gonna pick 2 because this is what jumps out to me, right? Both the Bournemouth game and the West Ham matches, the 2-2 draws. I was thinking to myself for the weekend, it's really rare that you watch these matches and there's a match where both teams dropping points is just really bad points dropped. And I thought those games included 4 teams where it was bad points dropped for all 4 teams for very different reasons, right? I think, if you're a team like Burnley or Sheffield and you're scrapping at the bottom and you're probably going to get relegated, you can't basically snatch, you can't drop these games that you lead by these scrappy goals, especially if you're up 2, right? And both these teams struggle to score. Both these teams have scored less goals than they've games played. So you never know when they're going to score 2 again in a single match week. Probably not till next year when they're in the championship. So, and then in the flip side of these are games that West Ham and Bournemouth have to have 3, right? They have to. They can't come out flat. They can't get flat-footed. They can't come out and concede goals versus those types of teams.
I totally agree on both counts. I think both were kind of funny matchups, right? The Bournemouth one, just an awkward match for them. They score early. They take the lead. First they missed the penalty, which, just makes everybody laugh on the first time anyone has captained Dominic Solanke in fantasy and maybe even triple capped him in the history of time. 2 of the best fixtures you could ever have in a double game week. And he goes out and misses a penalty 10 minutes into the first match. So that's outstanding. And that's that's right up there with me triple captaining Sadio Mane and him laying down 6 minutes in of a double game week or triple game week. I'm sorry. And I triple captained him and he got hurt 6 minutes into the first one. Story for another day. I'll say a match here. I totally agree. Both of those were points dropped. Talk about big points in a swing and what could mean a ton with European places on the line, Champions League qualification. More importantly, Aston Villa is teetering in places where people are really worried about their financial fair play status, that they might even have to sell homegrown players like Jacob Ramsey, guys like Douglas Luiz who classify as that so they can make major profits. That could be scary for Villa especially when it's been home matches and they're defensive and just their balance as a team. And when your club captain gets sent off for one of the easiest red cards you'll ever see awarded, really loses cool. They capitulate the match from there. They end up losing 4-0 to their direct rivals at home. I know it's not a death blow, but Tottenham went through a long period where they were missing a lot of key players, and they're getting them all back slowly, and they look like they're starting to figure out what Ange is asking for, and they still have a guy like Son who can win you a match like he did on Saturday afternoon. Would you almost teeter to making Tottenham the favorite at this point with the matches they still have to play?
I knew this was coming. I'm not there yet. I gotta tell you, like, I felt like the Spurs did what they kind of did, like what they kind of do, and that's like they score in spurts on the counter, and then they got the red, so they're up a minute, and they get 2 garbage time goals. I mean, they were clearly the better side throughout. I just felt like it wasn't I felt like today felt like a bad day at the office for Villa more than it felt like this is going to be standard operating procedure. They could regress. They could have a hangover for this. I didn't really feel like any of that. I just felt like they came out and they really got caught on the counter and they conceded twice in like 3.5 minutes. And from there, it just kind of, it unraveled. And that happens. I mean, we've seen it happen to really good Liverpool sides. We've seen it happen to some of the better teams in the league. I guess I think about us losing, like, I can't even remember what the final score is when we lost. We lose to Villa. What was it? It was something crazy.
7-3.
Right. But I just remember like the wheels came off, and it kind of felt like that for 3.5 minutes. Then you're down a man, and like, you get popped late. So I definitely think this is something that like should make Spurs fans feel good, supporters feel good, and it should make that side feel reinvigorated with Son coming back, and they can start putting the pieces together. It just felt like a bad day at the office for Villa. I mean, they definitely brought it on themselves. I thought it was a little bit of that and a little bit of Spurs having sensational moments in spurts.
Yeah, I just think you see how important James Maddison is to that side. I did not think it would fit in this well. I wasn't so sure in the offseason. He's pretty much kind of made a doubt. Or if you're not a believer in him at this point, I think it's kind of unfair to him because people said go to a bigger club, play with better players than Jamie Vardy, and he has, and make them better. And I think Son would tell you that he's having some of the most fun he's ever had. And that's, this is a team that offensive numbers got better when they got rid of the best offensive player in the history of the club, which is just kind of scary. And I do think there is something to Maddison being back. Pape Sarr being back in the midfield offers them something else going forward and defensively. And then you add in the 2 wide players. Timo Werner is, and then one of those like enigma type players, but he fits in really well with Spurs because of what he does and how quick he is. And then you have Aronson starting to come into his own. And you still have Richarlison coming back eventually, who is scoring goals for them and really starting to kind of put his stamp on it. So, we always say if you have center backs who can play, and I think Van de Ven can play, and I think the guy they bought in January is a pretty good player too. You have fullbacks who can create, which Udogie and Porro can. The keeper's done pretty well. I feel like it's coming together for Spurs at the right time, and they're getting healthy. And I think not having European football is only going to help them down the stretch. And I think they just have one goal, and that's maximizing points. Well, they have 2 goals. 1, qualifying for Europe and maximizing points, and 2, making sure Arsenal doesn't win the league. And, that match at home against Arsenal might be as tough a test for Arsenal as playing City at the Emirates. I really do believe that. Like, I think it's going to be a massive, massive match for them to have to take. So before we move off of this week, quickly, let's touch on Man United Everton. It was a 2-0 snooze fest. I barely paid attention to the match. Bruno Fernandes scores the penalty early. Marcus Rashford takes the second penalty of the match, both of which were for Garnacho getting taken down, both of which were legitimate penalties. One, I think, a handball, and the other for a tackle in the box or a foul in the box. Has Garnacho actually become Manchester United's best player, and is he their player of the season this year?
Yeah, probably. I think he's, he's definitely the most valuable piece, and I think it's only
Scary.
I think it's just a matter of time till the siren song of Real Madrid sort of, comes in on him. I think I gotta imagine that kid is got his eye kind of set towards the future anyway. But yeah, he's a sensational player. You're right. It was terrible football. I don't know, it's just crazy to watch Manchester United play. It's so hard to watch that team play football.
Yeah, there's not much more to be said about it. I really just wanted to get the Garnacho point off and see what your thoughts were there. Let's jump to one more match, and then we'll go to kind of our couple talking points and look at the table. Arsenal and Brentford. Weird match. Arsenal gets the game at home. Has to start Ramsdale because Raya's on loan. Inevitably, Ramsdale makes a howler of a mistake that leads to Brentford's only goal. Do you put any of that on Arteta for genuinely really not getting him any minutes this year? Like, didn't even give him minutes when they had the league and the group sewn up in Europe. Like, keeps going with Raya every single week, even when they have 5-6 goal leads where he could have put him in the last few weeks, even for a second half, to give him Premier League minutes and like to play with the starting defenders. Like, or is it just keeper's got to be ready, do your job?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you got to be ready, but I think, you can definitely help your guys out. That's such a weird situation to me. Like, I never was a fan of the Raya move anyway. I didn't think Ramsdale was that bad. I feel like if a kid at that age and that juncture in his career, either move that kid on or play him. Like, it doesn't make any sense what they're doing. I go back to the Spurs match where I think the real underlying story that I love when I look at this weekend is the fact that even when Chelsea wins, they still lose because their ex-players go on to other London clubs and are absolutely smashing it. And I think, I kind of said to myself to this, where is the line where I actually have to hold my hand up on Kai Havertz? And I think it ends up being 4 straight Premier League matches, him scoring. Like, I probably have to just go ahead and say I had it wrong and he's figured it out. And that's a credit to Arsenal.
He does look like he looks like the talent that was playing in Germany that everyone in the world wanted. People forget that Real Madrid, like Florentino Perez, was like breaking lockers when he found out he was going to Chelsea because he thought he was going to steal him and bring him to Madrid and have him like be one of the keys to the building pieces. Like, he was the Jude Bellingham piece before they were able to secure the best young midfielder in the world. Let's jump over. Let's look at the table here. Top of the table, Arsenal, have won 5 in a row. I think it's 8 on the bounce in the Premier League without loss. Liverpool obviously doing really well outside of the draw yesterday, and we'll talk about that and how it got there. City, and then, of course, Villa rounding out your top 4. Spurs 2 points behind, and then we really get bunched up between 6. And, some might argue you could go all the way down to Wolves, even Newcastle, with the fact that Europe might be 7 to 8 teams, depending on who wins the League Cup, FA Cup, and league title. Looking at this top half, what jumps out at you, Paul? Who's the biggest surprise in this top half?
Biggest surprise in this top half. I think the biggest surprise for me is that Newcastle has dropped a 10th of anything. I think you were a big proponent of they're not used to European comps. The extra fixtures are going to affect them. I thought they had enough. I thought they'd figure it out. So I'm shocked to see them down at 10th. I'm also shocked at how badly West Ham has been down the second half of this year to still be in 7th. And I think that really speaks to how, I don't think, we've talked about this, but I think this is a fairly weak Premier League. If you just look at this top, the 6 through 10 all the way down, and if you go all the way down to 14th, that 6th through 14th, none of those teams, United included, are consistent enough to even, for me to even consider having an outside chance of making a run at 5th. Do you know what I mean? When I look at these, I'm like, what team is going to go get hot at the right moment, get healthy at the right moment, and maybe make a run? And I'd say none of them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would absolutely agree with you. I think the Tottenham Villa, I thought we might have a conversation around will the Premier League get 4 or 5 Champions League spots? And at the beginning of the season, it was like a shoo-in that they'd have 5 for next year. Because for the last 4 or 5 years, they've had 2-3 teams in every competition go deep. But because Brighton went out and laid an absolute egg against Roma and will be getting jettisoned out of the Europa League, because West Ham's trailing, even Villa, a 0-0 draw with Ajax, it doesn't look great right now that England will get that extra Champions League spot, and it looks like it could be 5 German teams or 5 Italian teams, which is ludicrous to me. Yeah. That the Italians will send 5 teams to the Champions League and England won't, but that's, shame on England. But to me, it's still a 5-team race. Tottenham and Villa are fighting for 4th place. It's basically a showdown for which team can get 4th. And I genuinely believe, we are in for what could come down to be, I think the last time 3 teams were this tight in any major league was that year that Atletico Madrid won it in Spain on the last day, with the Barcelona, Madrid, and Real all went in the last day with a weird chance, but really all Atletico had to do was win, and they ended up winning that title. Really, really crazy to me. I will say I think Newcastle being as low as they are is probably the biggest negative shock to the top half. I think for the fact that half of our contributors and people who made predictions had Wolves potentially being in the drop zone or fighting for relegation, I think them being in 9th, and not only in 9th, but literally within a win away from 7th, which would put them in European places, is pretty insane. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Wolves, so we'll save that. So you mentioned the bottom half of the table. Before we go there, when you look at those top 3 teams, when you look at how they're playing and what they have in front of them, I feel like Arsenal will still advance tomorrow against Porto at home. It's one thing to lose 1-0 when you're playing a little tight at Porto, which is a crazy ass place to play. I think they come home and Porto doesn't get to play that, I can start a 65-year-old center back and will time waste from 2 minutes into the game. I don't think that shit works in London tomorrow. And I actually think Arsenal scores one early and that thing gets turned on its head. If it doesn't, look out, because squeaky bum time will happen. But with Arsenal, assuming they go forward in the Champions League, City's already advanced. How do you see the European aspect of this title race affecting?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could, because I think both City and Arsenal kind of have to prioritize it. You know what I mean? Like, I think both of those teams, like City is obviously chasing getting it done. And Arsenal, I don't think, Arsenal's probably thinking like, this is the closest they've been in ages. Like you were talking
14 years.
Decades.
14 years since they hosted a knockout game in the Champions League. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I think they got the squad depth to do it. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think out of any of these sides, it probably impacts Arsenal the most, because they're the least experienced in this realm, having to deal with this late in the season. And I think they're the least experienced with it as well, where you've got a City side that may not have the depth Arsenal does, but definitely has experience being there and dealing with this late in the season.
As we know, as Liverpool supporters, we know that Liverpool will prioritize and Klopp will try to win matches. Does the fact that this is the Europa League and it's not like it's his first year here and we had to win that tournament so we could qualify for Champions League that we came up short against Sevilla, does it have any bearing to him if come those last 2-3 weeks of the season he knows we're playing a semifinal for the Europa League, but we got a game on the weekend that is a must-have 3 points for the Premier League title, knowing he's only got a month left in England? Like, will he prioritize the Premier League over the Europa League? 1, and 2, from Paul Bickler's opinion, should he?
The answer to the first question is I don't know. think he certainly should, right? Like,
Thank you.
I think he certainly should, but we just never noticed, right? This is the guy that trotted out almost the entire starting 11 into dead rubber. And
two guys got subbed off in the first half injured, including one who was down for the year.
So, like, I don't know. We'll see how much we've learned here. I'd certainly aged me over the years seeing these lineups come out. So I hope so. I think, I guess I keep thinking that if you're going to go into extra time in a cup final and throw teenagers on, hopefully you'd have enough sense to do something similar in that situation and rest your stable of veterans for the weekend. But we'll see.
This is the one thing where I give Pep credit. There were those times last year where he'd get killed for playing 90 minutes with the same guys and no subs. But then 3 days later in the Champions League, he would rest 5 of those guys and they wouldn't get a single minute in, even though it was a crucial match. And he had faith in his other guys and his reserves. And, I would like to see Klopp take, even if he has to take that approach, piss all of us off and have a match where you only use 2 subs in the Premier League, but then tell Darwin, like, kid, unless we have to break glass, like literally to bring on chaos, you're not playing today. So don't get pissed off when we put the Dan's kid in, even if we're chasing a goal. Like, you're taking a rest. We need you to be ready for next Sunday or Saturday or whenever it is. I think the Thursday, Sunday makes me nervous as well. I don't really love that as much. Let's take a look at the bottom half of the table. Starting with Chelsea, which is always great. Even when Chelsea wins, they feel like they lose. Chelsea's still sitting in 11th place. Where in this list does anyone have to worry? Like, are we just getting to fait accompli and we understand that, as much of a plucky story as it's been, and we've credited Luton for playing so well all year, they still only have 5 victories. And they have created ways to lose football matches. And I feel like when you do that and you're when you have less talent and you find ways to give away points that you miraculously were finding ways to have in the bank, I can think of Tottenham, Arsenal, the match against us, and it's not just the big boys. They've done this. I mean, they lost at home to Sheffield United. Mm-hmm. Is it just these same 3 teams that came up this year are going back down? And if we are all so lucky, they will not, any of them, find their way back up anytime soon?
I mean, that's what it looks like. I think you still got to keep an eye on. I think Force and Brentford can score enough goals to at least pick up draws, right, if they need to. I think where it gets interesting is that if Everton can't find some sort of way to score goals, they could be in trouble here. Like, if Luton pulls off a couple of miracles and Forest, continues to score goals and Everton can't, I could see them getting into a situation here down the next 10 or 11 games. But that's the only spot on here that I really see as like, I think these other teams have enough in the tank here.
What's insane to me, Paul, and we've said this before, but it's just really, really, like, we're looking at the last 5 matches for the bottom half of the Premier League. So we're talking about 50 Premier League matches, right, and results on this screen. And the bottom half of this Premier League has secured 9 wins out of those 50 matches.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are Fulham. Like, that to me is just really, really ludicrous. And I think it speaks to how bad. And I think if you even look at it, the fact that they can't even draw matches.
Right.
This is where I feel like we're probably not going to get one of the classic relegation scraps. Because to me, what makes those interesting is when the Lutons and the Forests, they just pick up late goals, they get draws, they pick up those weak points, and then maybe they get a big result and they move the I mean, look at these goal differentials.
Well,
Sheffield United has been outscored by 50 goals.
Like, well, it's crazy to think that you can score less than 1 a game and concede more than 3 almost. It's insane. Like, that's wild.
I look at these things and it makes you wonder, like, is the game broken? And I know that's a question probably for the summertime or for like a completely separate pod about finances. There was also news today that the Premier League is back at it with their fights to change the way that they're going to keep track of money and finances, and they may scrap the program that they had last year, but that won't save Everton, City, or Forest, because those rules were in place when they broke them, but they're going to go more to like a UEFA system. I tried reading the article to see if we could have a logical conversation. I realized quickly I'm not smart enough for that, and there were just way too many words and more words that didn't make any sense. And honestly, every time I read it, it sounded like it was just going to favor the top 4 or 5 revenue driving clubs in the Premier League, which made me know that it was exactly what is going to happen and exactly what the clubs or what the top of the league wants, which is really all that matters because they control the rest of the league. Let's move on to a couple of our topics. I want to talk a little bit about Wolves, actually. We talked about it. Gary O'Neill, currently the manager. I asked the question here, Paul, is Gary O'Neill the Premier League manager of the season? He was not employed when the first ball was kicked this year. He was negotiating his contract because the manager of Wolves walked out on the job before the first match stating, and I quote, "This club will go nowhere. They don't care. There's no talent." Gary O'Neill walked in. Julian Lopetegui walked out. And Gary O'Neill has them top half of the table, a win away from fighting for Europe, and in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, and a favorite playing Coventry. Has anyone done a better job managing what he has than Gary O'Neill so far this season?
No, not given the circumstances. Definitely not. I mean, I would give it to him for sure. I think he gets overlooked in his own right, but I think Unai Emery probably has the inside track on it, just considering the fact that they're going to get especially if they get Champions League, right? Like, I mean, I imagine that's got to be his to get. But I think given the situation, Gary O'Neill's is probably the most impressive in the league.
And I'll say this. So let me spin it this way, because he seems like a very loyal man. There was all the reports out there that he was like gutted when he was let go by Bournemouth because he was so looking forward to coaching those same players he kept up last year. This year and watching them kick on. And to be fair to the Bournemouth management, at times this year, they have played a much more progressive football. They bought players that fit the new style. The new style seems like it fits to the talent of the players. So maybe they made right for their club. But if you are Gary O'Neill and you have this great year at Wolves, but there's questions about the financials at Wolves and the potential to have to sell players to balance the books. If a bigger club comes calling, say a West Ham, or, I think Everton is still, he's got ties to Liverpool, but it's a bigger club than Wolves are on the spectrum, but I don't think it is right now. But if a better job opened up to him, would he be smart to go, or is he just starting to lay the foundation to maybe make the big jump to an even better job if he spends a little time at Wolves and tries to build something?
I 100% think that he should move if he has the opportunity to. I mean, I think, and this is for anybody in business, right? Like, the way that you get paid more is you move more. And that's crazy, and it's not conducive to anybody's mental health or good for companies, but that's the reality of it. And I think, like, for him, if I got the West Ham job, I would snatch that in a heartbeat. I think for him to progress as a manager, he's going to have to start managing bigger clubs and bigger situations and bigger players and bigger contracts and all that stuff that happens, right? And I think that's the natural progression of a manager. So I think he should want to do that, right? And I imagine he does want to do that. And if he doesn't, he's probably in the wrong business, because I think these clubs don't have that same loyalty that we would ask managers to have.
Yeah, I heard the West Ham links. I think it was yesterday on the radio.
Makes a lot of sense.
I'd never thought of it before, and I was like, oh, he's the perfect fit. Because he's pragmatic enough that you don't lose what David Moyes brought from a stability standpoint. but he offers a fresher, newer mindset and a little new way of doing things. And clearly, he's a great man motivator from that side of things, because you've never seen a player not work hard for him. And there is a lot of talent at West Ham, but they're going to need a good manager, because they're probably going to get rated for a few of their top pieces, whether it be Kudus, whether it be Paqueta. I'm starting to think that Bowen might be one of these guys that took his big contract and just becomes a legend at a club like that and scores the big goals and stays. We'll see. He might have the move in him. So with some time left here, let's do what I didn't want to have to do much of today. And let's recap a little bit of Liverpool 1 versus Manchester City 1 at Anfield yesterday. A little reaction and recap. Let's start with the lineups from both sides, Paul. What jumped out at you before we start talking about some of the keys and the tactics in the second half? Were you surprised that Andy Robertson wasn't in the starting lineup from the jump?
Yes, I was. I'm really surprised. And I thought the entire lineup in my opinion, the lineup was too conservative in general. I thought the lineup was conservative. I thought the subs were conservative. I thought the approach of trying to win a match in one half for City was the wrong approach. I understand what we were doing. I get it. I just thought it was the wrong call. I thought the manager got, love Jurgen, but I thought he got it wrong. And I don't know. I wasn't a fan of starting Soboslai, who's been off form, then injured, still coming back, not 100%. You're going to stack him in there. I think the only smart move he did was actually put him on the left side, where we haven't seen a whole lot of him. But I wasn't a fan of it. I wasn't a fan of Harvey up top. We've seen that before. He essentially was just another midfielder. Like, if you looked at his starting position with the ball, he wasn't advanced at all. So that created problems spatially on that side. Yeah. Didn't think the lineup was great going in. Yeah.
So the first 45 minutes, both of us were attacking players. Neither one of us ever wanted to defend inside our own 6-yard box. I'm not putting it on Darwin Nunez, honestly, because the guy gets blocked off and 2 other guys are asleep. And honestly, once again, let's talk about tactics of the sport. If someone's covering the front post like they would have been for the first 100 years this game was played, and no one was zonal marking and everyone was man for man, this never happens, and John Stones never scores. Where do you put the goal down? Because Kelleher didn't cover himself in glory either, because he gets over and the ball bounces off his chest. I mean, he was amazing in the match overall, but on that play, he is far from covered there at that front post. Like, is that just a calamity of errors, or is it Kevin De Bruyne's brilliance maybe not getting enough?
I think it's something they saw. Like, I think it's something they saw in the way that we defend set pieces. We've given up a fair amount of set pieces all year. Thankfully, we've scored plenty too. But I mean, I hate that goal because nothing ages you, like saying, where's the guy on the post? Like, that immediately identifies you as a certain generation.
Yep.
Yep.
So old. But, that's what generation, old.
But I hate zonal marking so much. So yeah, I think it was a combination of obviously a combination of errors there, but I also think it's something they saw and really worked on in training, and credit to them. They got it.
Yeah, and I think that is more evident than any time when they show Pep on the bench and he immediately turns around and is literally like has this glowing face and he's pointing to the set piece coach who is about 8 rows up in the crowd, because that coach doesn't even mean enough to get to sit down with the players on the sideline. He's like literally got a ticket like me or you would have had. He's right up there with the throw-in coach. Yeah, that guy. But he was clearly like, it was a big deal. Pep was excited about it. They saw that. They knew it was coming. After the match, they had to tell John Stones that there was a VAR check to even check that the ball didn't go out of bounds. I didn't even realize that. They actually ran a VAR check, because I kept saying, like, why are we? They were like, well, we have to check this. And I'm like, what the hell are you checking? It's a set piece. You can't be offsides. Right. I'm like, if they call this a foul on Ake, I'm done. I'm quitting, because if they had called that a blocking foul to take a goal away, even against us, I would have said we've lost this. This is absolutely insane. I didn't love that. I didn't love the goal. I thought that we were too conservative to start. I'll be honest. I thought Kwanzaa was one of the best players on the pitch. I thought it was ludicrous to start a 19, 20-year-old kid at home in that match and have Andy Robertson sitting on the bench. Like, for me, I would have started Gomez. I know he likes playing him. I might have, if I had to start Kwanzaa, because in my heart I thought he was the best center back, I would have started Gomez over Bradley, who at times I thought for the first time, like, showed a couple times where he tried to go forward at the wrong times. He pressed in the wrong places. It looked like he was trying to make up for the bad shot/cross that almost broke Darwin in half at the post, and the fact that he didn't shoot that other ball first time. And I thought after that he started to stretch and press a little bit. Right. And a couple times he even put Kwanzaa in tough spots with like back passes. So that was a little bit like nerve-wracking for me. Soboslai, I agree. I think I would have had Elliott starting. And again, I guess I don't understand the Mo situation. Like, if Mo was able to play in a 5-1 win in Prague, right, how is he not able to go from the start? And it felt, to your point, I think we were actually playing that match to get to the half 0-0 and win it in the second half. Now, seeing how we battered them in the second half, let's go there now. So we get to half, it's 1-0. At times, I thought we were even a little lucky to get there at 1-0. I started to get nervous in the first half. That Kevin De Bruyne shot that Kelleher saves, what point of the match did you feel like it turned? Was it the penalty, or was it just the second half whistle and seeing just the energy and excitement that they came out with?
Yeah, I just think they came out at the whistle differently. I think you make a few changes, you get to halftime. I think that was always the plan. You know what I mean? And I just think, I don't know, if you plan to do that, you're not planning to win the first half. And I think that's my problem with that. And so, yeah, I just felt totally different second half. I think it was something like it was the first time since like Arsenal, maybe a year and a half ago, that City has basically had less than 46% of possession, which is kind of wild. So, yeah, I mean, we pinned them back. We had chances, I think you look at the way that second half went down, and I don't think that you can really ask for more, right? I think if you have that many chances, you got to expect to come away with 3. And so that's the unfortunate part. I feel for Diaz. He's going to get a lot of heat this week, rightfully so. He has not been clinical enough for quite a while now. And then this was just sort of like the moment where it seemed like all play, especially first half, was running through him on the left side. And there just was, it's a combination of not being clinical enough and not making the right choices on the ball, right? And I think it's been tough to watch. It's been tough to see. The effort's there. He's certainly causing issues, but it's tough to see attack after attack sort of break down like that.
So let's go through some of the key points. Obviously, in the second half, you have the penalty. Ake, leaves the ball short to Ederson. Ederson comes out. Darwin really gets a poor touch on the ball, which drives it past Ederson, but it's all he had to do because he knew the contact's coming. And let's be real here, people. He is ready to go down before Ederson hits him. He clobbers him, and you got to call a penalty. He hits him so hard, he's fouled. He also hits him so hard, he hurts himself. But, I mean, this wasn't one of these, like, just clears him out and we got to give him a red card. I saw people screaming for red cards. If they give a red card there, again, this game is lost. They got rid of triple jeopardy for that exact reason. And Ederson is trying to make a play on the ball. He doesn't get the ball, but he's not coming to just injure the player. He's coming to get the ball. He's short. I think Michael Oliver gets everything right there. Spot kick immediately, yellow card. Injury timeout, and McAllister steps up and absolutely buries it. I know I was screaming for McAllister to take it. There were some in the Discord channel asking for Soboslai. One, do you like the idea of McAllister taking that penalty? And two, would McAllister be taking the next penalty if it were up to Paul Bickler?
It'll be Mo until Mo's gone, but it should be McAllister. I mean, I think, he is the most experienced in the side with big moments. He's a World Cup winner, and he was a critical part of being a World Cup winner, too. It wasn't just like he was along for the ride there. And he has a beautiful bent on him. I think it's got to be him moving forward with life after Mo, I would imagine.
But you don't think there's any world, even as poor as Mo's been. Like, so we're going to talk about the penalty that could have been in stoppage time. You believe Mo grabs that ball and takes it there after McAllister takes it in the chest and buried the first one?
I do, because I don't think Jurgen Klopp has it in him to have that conversation with Mo before he leaves.
That's fair. I don't disagree with you, by the way. I was 100% thought that he would take it. And they would have done that thing where McAllister held it the whole time and then handed it to Mo, which was the opposite of what they did this time, just to kind of shock everybody. They had McAllister hold the ball the whole time. And I was like, I swear to God, I remember looking at Kelly and saying, if he hands the ball to Darwin Nunez, we shut the game off. Because it wouldn't have been fair to the kid. He was playing a great match. He had just gotten taken out by the keeper. I want to ask you about Darwin before we go into Diaz, because it really started to change when Darwin came off, and I don't think that's a knock on Darwin. I thought on the pitch he was one of the best players that played against City for the time he was out there. We were a little bit more pedestrian at that time. Was it more about Mo coming on and resting Darwin? This is minutes and muscle injuries. Or was this a tactical thing that Klopp actually thought Gakpo was going to bring something different than Nunez was in that moment? Because he didn't do much in the time he was out there other than get people to complain about him in multiple different areas of social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think it had to be tactical. I think at this point, I hope you're not worried about resting legs when you're in a critical match against the team that you're up against in a title race against, right? Like I would hope that it's not that. I think Gakpo, if anything, adds another body to the mids, which you probably need. Going, especially when you've got a team pegged back the way we had them pegged back, you probably need less of that over the top threat that you get with Nunez, and you probably need to have one more body that's good at decent hold up play, right? And I think that's what Gakpo does well.
So what's going on with Cody Gakpo at this point, in your opinion, Paul? Is it a confidence issue? Is he finally convincing himself he's not a center forward and or number 9 and likes to play wide, and is showing it when he's played wide on the right or left and he's been better in both or in the mids? And is it because it does look at times, and I don't like this because I hate doing this because it's the body language police, but it looks at times like he's borderline disinterested. And I understand he's Dutch and everyone says that's how they look and that's how Verge looks. No, but you know what I mean? Like, they're just so cool and calm and they don't smile. They don't get overly hyped either way. But when you're moping around the pitch and in a match like this, and you come on and you are just not up to the speed even, and you don't even look like you're trying to get up to it right away. It was a weird look. I'll be honest. It was a bad look yesterday.
Yeah. It was, that was unsettling. Just because typically you at least see that effort from him, right? You see the press, and so to see him come out and sort of jog in a semicircle around the top 3, that was really strange, man. I don't know what that's about. I do think, if one thing that I think Jurgen has a tendency to try to find minutes for players wherever he can find minutes for them, and I think sometimes when he does that, he messes with the identity of a player. They have a hard time figuring, they're used to having to do so many different things in so many different roles. I think they lose their identity of what they're good at and what they're supposed to bring to the side because they're so focused on what they're supposed to bring to an area when they're there, if that makes sense. And that's what I just kind of get that vibe from Cody. Especially a kid, you gotta remember this kid isn't used to looking from the outside in, and since he was probably 11. Right. I mean, he was essentially a prodigy that came through the Dutch system. He started everywhere he went. So this is him on the outside looking in is not something that he's used to. So I think this is probably a big adjustment for him. I hope he can figure it out. But I think we've always kind of hinted at this summer. There's going to be a manager that has to make a big decision on him.
Well, and I think that's another part, and I've mentioned that a few times, and I know people don't love it when I mention it in Discord or I mention it on social media. I talk about the new manager coming in and making big decisions on lots of different areas of the pitch, and I think what probably gets unthought of or not brought up a lot is that these players know that that's going to happen too. So there's a lot of guys, and maybe Diaz is one of them. Maybe Gakpo is one of them. Like, they're not just fighting to try to win trophies and battle for every point for Jurgen Klopp. They're fighting for their Liverpool career or for the next move. For all we know, Gakpo has decided, I don't love it here, and maybe this wasn't the best move. I should have went to United, or I should have went to Spain, or I should be in Italy, or whatever it is. And he's thinking to himself, like, I got to get this right. I got to get things right. And I think we underestimate, like you mentioned earlier, the only way to improve in life is to move on. That's how you make more money. You get bonuses. You get new signs and new contracts. Well, you don't do that unless you're valued and you're worth something. So let's talk the last two big talking points, and we'll preview next week. Diaz's second half, I think some of the opportunities are getting a little overblown because we all remember so many opportunities this year where he just kind of dribbles down a cul-de-sac, gets caught up, gets the ball stuck under his feet when he just needs to square a ball. There's so many opportunities for him to do things. He's always cutting in and he shoots to the corner of the cop. The pass from Mo that puts him in on goal, where he fluffs his line and tries to chip the keeper when he could either dribble around him or just slop past him, and he opens his hips up and just kicks it, and he misses by yards. I mean, to me, that's the one. I'm hoping that's the one that led to these two hands on his head, because for me, that was the one that was the most brutal. The first one where I just think he doesn't take it first time because he's just not confident enough. How much of it has to be put on him? Because if that was Darwin Nunez, there'd still be people talking about it today, that this is why he's never going to be good enough. This is why he's not our guy. Like, how much has to be put on Diaz for yesterday? Because, I mean, his XG was actually the highest of any player in the Premier League ever not to score a goal. It was like 3.5.
It was brutal. It was really, really brutal. So, I mean, I think he has to carry some of that, right? I think you have to. I think when you have that many chances, you got to carry that. And I'll tell you, second half when, I'll give him this, right? Second half when he had every reason in the world to just shut it down and mail it in and look like Gakpo, he actually turned on the jets. And I actually saw some of that electric pace that we haven't seen in a while. Like, I didn't even see it in the first half, but there was a couple where he just put the ball in space and set him faster than everybody on the side of the pitch, right? And I think in some ways that's what he needs to do, is boil this back down to something simple, right? Like, I'm just going to put the ball in space and beat everybody and then figure it out from there. And so I don't know how much of this is him in his own head at this point, but like, if he can figure out a way to simplify this game and get back down to pace and power and let the rest sort itself out on natural ability. I also think he's one of those players that right now probably just needs to think about, how can I facilitate attacks right now? How can I put pace in play and give the ball to somebody in a position to be, dangerous? I think that's, if I was Diaz right now, that's what I would, if I was his, coach or manager or friend or whatever, that's what I would tell him. You need to simplify this thing, get back down to like just the real cornerstone fundamental pieces, what make you special, and do that.
So we don't have much time here, Paul, and I kind of deliberately left us without a lot of time, knowing we're going to talk a lot about it on our Monday night podcast that will be recorded shortly after this. The McAllister penalty in the 98th minute, whatever it was. Doku comes through the ball. He gets a piece of the ball. The studs are high, obviously. It's funny. I've seen it in both sides. I saw Liverpool pundits saying, I like that they didn't call a penalty here because it just felt like it would have been a hard way to end this match in that spot. I see both sides of it because I didn't think it was so clear-cut, because I don't think it's violent conduct. I really don't. Like, I don't know that I think he would have got a red card. I mean, what happened to Gakpo in the middle of the pitch was so much worse against Spurs earlier in the season. What happened to Kanate earlier might have been worse from a actual, studs-up challenge. But what we saw with McAllister, what we saw with Curtis Jones, the way they've done this when looking at it, this has been at times a card. So I just want to ask you, you believe it should have been a penalty, Stonewall, no question, or do you understand a little bit of ambiguity, and because of it, It's why nothing is ever going to get changed until the rules are changed.
To me, there's no ambiguity. I think it's a penalty, and I think it's pretty clearly a penalty. I think you're right about the violent conduct. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a straight red here, but I think the reason that this happens, right? The reason that obviously he gets studs in the chest here is that like whether there's force or not, what happens if you don't win this challenge in your city? Like if you don't win this ball, like, right, you're in a spot where you're probably conceding a goal. And B, if you make this challenge, right, and you put your foot up here, what happens if you don't get the ball, right? Like I think both of those things, like you have to say, probably favor Liverpool in the run of play. I think at the end of the day, I think you nailed it. I think and this has been consistent throughout these matches where Arsenal and City and Liverpool have played this year. Consistently has happened where they do not want to make big decisions that are going to award points or take points away from a match in the final moments of the game in a title race. They do not want to do it. Like they don't like, and I think that's the problem, is because I think that's the rub of the game. Like these moments happen in games. And like these are games, like these are moments where titles are won and lost. And I think what's frustrating for Liverpool fans is we do not feel like we're held to the same standard like that these other clubs are. You know, it's hard when you look at the Odegaard handball. It's hard when you look at this. Like, and I think it's harder when you know that a ref like Michael Oliver has recently reffed a match in the UAE in their league, getting paid by them while they have ownership in a club in a title race in the Premier League. Like all these things, like I think are just difficult for Liverpool supporters to swallow. I think it's a bad look for the Premier League all around. It is what it is at this point. I think what I'm choosing to focus on is like, that sucks. We should have had those points, but what I'm choosing to focus on is like, there are plenty of other points in this match where we could have won, right? Where we could have won this thing. And I think that's what you have to do. I don't think it makes it right. I don't think it makes it fair. I think we all remember being robbed from the title by a handball that should have been called on City. Like, I mean, it goes down the line. There's a long history for Liverpool supporters at this point of feeling wronged at this point, and this is just kind of another notch in that post.
Don't disagree. The only thing with that handball is it was Everton, so we would have had to rely on them to score that penalty to win us the league. And with our luck, it literally would have been Calvert-Lewin kicking it into the Rose Z. So thank you as always for tuning in. Thank you to my co-host Paul. If you are not already, please get over to the YouTube page, subscribe to our channel today. Go ahead. You'll get all the updates and content. We have our morning coffee show on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We have the Monday night podcast, the Thursday night podcast, the fantasy show, the Premier League show, the panel show. We bring you pre and post match each and every week. And we have our Patreon subscription service up and running for those who want even more special American Scouser content. Who could ask for more? Well, if you're not getting what you need, get on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe today. For myself and Bickler, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more of the Premier League show. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time.